I'm not really the type to post stuff like this, but what happened still messes with my head, and maybe putting it out there will help. This was last summer, when I was 16. My mom asked me to house sit for her friend while she and her husband went on some trip. They lived way out in this quiet, wooded area, like not even streetlights quiet, and it was just me and my little brother, Tyler, who was 11 at the time. We figured we'd make a night of it, order pizza, watch dumb horror movies, and pretend we were grown-ups for once. The house was beautiful, kinda old, with those big windows that always feel like they're watching you back when it's dark outside. During the day, it felt peaceful. But the second the sun dipped, that whole vibe flipped. Around 9:30, Tyler was falling asleep next to me on the couch, and I remember pausing the movie to grab us more snacks. I passed by the kitchen window and saw the motion light in the backyard flicker on. It caught my eye because it hadn't done that all day, even when I'd gone out there earlier to feed the dog. I figured maybe a raccoon or something had wandered in. Didn't think too much of it, but then it went off and turned on again. And again. At first, I thought it might be faulty, but I got this weird gut feeling, like when your stomach tightens without any real reason. I peeked out but couldn't see anything, just the empty yard and the trees swaying a little in the dark. Still, I tried to brush it off. I went back to the living room and tried not to let it get to me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. About 15 minutes later, while Tyler was snoring softly beside me, I heard this faint creaking sound, like metal scraping lightly. I muted the TV and just listened. It was subtle, but it was there, slow and irregular, like someone was easing open the back gate. That gate was tall and kind of rusted, so it always made noise when you opened it, even gently. I tiptoed to the kitchen again and looked out the back window, but the yard looked totally empty. The light was off now. I stood there for a minute, frozen, just staring. That's when I realized the dog, a big golden retriever, wasn't barking. He hadn't made a sound all night. That freaked me out even more, because he was the type to go off at a squirrel. I locked the back door, double-checked the windows in the kitchen, then quietly moved to the front of the house. The living room windows were big and had those thin curtains that barely cover anything. I tried peeking out without making it obvious, and that's when I saw the motion light on the side of the house flash on. Not the backyard this time, the side near the garage. That's when it really hit me that something was wrong. The lights only come on with movement, and it kept happening in different spots. It was like someone was walking around the house. Slowly. I didn't see a figure yet, but my chest felt tight. I turned off the TV, gently shook Tyler awake, and whispered that we needed to be quiet. He could tell by my face that something was wrong. I tried calling my mom first, just to let her know something weird was going on, but there was no signal. Not even one bar. I walked around holding the phone up, even stepped near the front door just to check, but nothing. That's when I remembered the house still had a landline phone in the hallway. I picked it up, and all I heard was static. Not a dial tone, just this low, constant crackling. I hung up and tried again, same thing. Tyler was standing behind me now, holding onto my hoodie sleeve, not saying anything. I didn't want to scare him more, but I was already freaking out inside. I couldn't call anyone, and we were surrounded by woods with no neighbors close enough to hear us scream if it came to that. We went around the house turning off all the lights, hoping it would make it harder for whoever was out there to see inside. My heart was racing so fast I could feel it in my ears. I grabbed one of those long fireplace pokers from next to the hearth. Not that I'd be much of a threat, but it felt better than nothing. I told Tyler to stay in the hallway and keep quiet while I checked the locks again. That's when I heard a thump. Not loud, but definite. It came from the window in the laundry room, like someone had tried to slide it open, and it hit the lock. I didn't go in there. I couldn't. I just stood outside the door and listened. Nothing after that, just silence. The kind that feels thick, like it's waiting for something to happen. I backed away from the laundry room and went straight to Tyler. He looked up at me with this terrified face, like he knew something really bad was going on now. I took him upstairs, thinking maybe it'd be safer up there. There was a guest room with a lock on the door, and I figured we could at least hide and wait it out. I know how that sounds, hiding, but when you're cut off like that, no phone, no neighbors, no real way out, you don't exactly feel brave. We grabbed a flashlight, turned it on just enough to see, and locked ourselves in. I remember sitting there in the dark, the only sound being Tyler breathing next to me, and the occasional creak of the house settling. At least, I told myself it was the house. Maybe 30 minutes passed like that. Then we heard it again, footsteps. Not inside, but just below us, like someone was walking slowly around the outside of the house. Gravel crunching. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but then Tyler whispered, "Did you hear that?" And I knew it was real. We moved to the corner of the room, staying low. I turned off the flashlight. There was a window in the guest room that looked out onto the driveway. We stayed away from it at first, but curiosity got the best of me. I crawled just close enough to peek through the side of the curtain, and that's when I saw them. A shadow, definitely a person, just standing by the garage door. Not moving, just standing there like they were thinking about their next move. I couldn't see their face, they were too far under the shadows, but I could tell it wasn't someone from the neighborhood. They weren't holding a flashlight or calling out like a lost hiker or anything like that. They were just standing there, too still. I watched for what felt like forever, barely breathing. Then they slowly walked toward the side of the house, disappearing under the overhang. I ducked back fast, heart pounding, not even sure if they'd seen me. We stayed completely still after that. No more lights turned on. No more footsteps. Nothing. And honestly, that silence was worse than the noises. Not knowing if they were still out there or already inside messed with my head bad. Eventually, we started hearing something again, faint taps, like someone lightly trying each window, one by one. It circled the house. Front, side, then the back. The worst part was how patient it all felt. Like whoever it was wasn't in a rush, like they were enjoying it. I kept thinking maybe it was some twisted game, maybe even more than one person. At one point, we heard what sounded like a fingernail dragging across the siding under our window. Just once, long and slow. Tyler had his hands over his ears, eyes squeezed shut. I couldn't comfort him, I was just as scared. All I could think about was that there was no help coming, and if that person got in, there was nowhere else to go. At some point, I don't even know how long after, everything just stopped. No more tapping, no more footsteps, nothing. We sat there in complete silence for what must have been hours, too scared to move, listening to every tiny sound. Eventually, the first light of morning started creeping in through the window. That was the only time I let myself breathe a little. I waited until the sun was fully up before I unlocked the guest room door. Every part of me was shaking. I crept downstairs with the poker still in my hand. Every window and door was still locked. No signs of a break-in. Nothing disturbed. Even the dog was back in his bed, tail wagging like nothing had happened, like he hadn't vanished the whole night. When the homeowners came back later that afternoon, I told them everything. They looked concerned, but not exactly shocked. The wife admitted that, a few months back, someone had tried opening their bedroom window in the middle of the night, but they'd brushed it off as a drunk local. They even had motion cameras, but none of them had been working lately, just technical glitches, apparently. I never stayed there again. To this day, I have no idea who was out there or what they wanted. No one ever got caught, but I know what I heard. I know what I saw, and I still get that sick feeling in my stomach whenever a motion light flickers on without a sound. I just needed to get away from everything for a bit. After a rough breakup that completely knocked the wind out of me, I booked a remote Airbnb cabin deep in the woods for the weekend. One of those off-grid places with no Wi-Fi, no cell signal, just trees and silence for miles. The kind of quiet that either heals you or makes you hear your own thoughts too loud. I got there on a Friday afternoon, and the road leading to it was long, bumpy, and honestly kind of eerie. Still, the place looked just like the photos, wooden walls, big windows, a little porch facing the forest. There was only one other house vaguely in sight, way across an open patch of land, mostly hidden behind trees. At first, it felt like exactly what I needed. I was unloading my car when I noticed him, a man standing outside that distant house. He waved, and I instinctively waved back, thinking that'd be the end of it. But a couple of minutes later, he started walking over. Fast, like he didn't want me to close the door before he got there. He introduced himself as Dave, said he lived on the property next door and hadn't seen anyone new in a while. He talked a lot, kind of rambling, and gave off that socially awkward vibe. Not threatening, just off. I chalked it up to him being lonely. Still, I felt uneasy right away. There was no real reason for him to come all the way over like that. I figured it was just a one-time thing, and that he'd leave me alone after saying hi. I was wrong. Later that evening, I was sitting on the porch with a blanket and a book, trying to relax, when I heard footsteps on the gravel path. I looked up, and there he was again, Dave. No knock, no call out, just standing a few feet from the porch steps like he'd been waiting for me to notice him. He smiled and said he was just checking in to make sure I had everything I needed. I tried to be polite, said I was fine, but he didn't leave. He started talking about his property, how he built most of it himself, how peaceful it is out here, how people from the city don't know how to be alone. The way he said that stuck with me. It wasn't threatening, exactly, but it felt like something else was sitting just under his words. I laughed nervously and mentioned I was tired from the drive, hoping he'd take the hint. He didn't. He stayed standing there, talking, asking weirdly personal questions. Was I here alone? What brought me out here? Was I planning to stay for long? I lied and said a friend might be joining me later. That finally seemed to make him pause. He said something like, "Shame. I thought you were the kind that enjoys solitude." Then he turned and walked back across the field without another word. I went inside, locked the door, and tried to brush it off, but the mood had shifted. I wasn't relaxed anymore. I kept looking out the window, even though it was already getting dark, half expecting to see him standing out there again. I told myself I was just being paranoid, but deep down, something didn't sit right. The next morning, I woke up early and decided to take a short walk around the property with my coffee. I hadn't seen any signs of Dave since last night, so I started to relax a bit. But as I was walking along the edge of the trees, I noticed something off, boot prints in the soft dirt, leading from the direction of his house toward the side of my cabin. They weren't mine. I hadn't been over there. I followed them with my eyes and saw they led right up to one of the side windows, the one next to the bedroom. My stomach dropped. I hadn't heard anything during the night, but suddenly I couldn't remember if I'd locked that window before going to bed. I went inside immediately and checked. It was locked, but now I wasn't sure if it had been locked before. That whole morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been watching me sleep. I kept glancing out the windows, expecting to see him just standing there. Around noon, I was washing dishes when I noticed something on the porch railing. A small tin cup filled with wild berries. No note. I hadn't left it there. I opened the door slowly and looked around, but no one was in sight. I didn't touch the cup, just stared at it like it might explode. It wasn't a kind gesture, it felt like a message. Like he was saying, I was here. I can get close. I brought it inside with a paper towel, dumped the berries in the trash, and locked every door and window again. That was when I started seriously considering packing up and leaving. But part of me didn't want to overreact. I kept telling myself maybe he was just weird and trying to be nice in his own creepy way. By mid-afternoon, I was getting restless. I kept checking the windows every few minutes like I was stuck in some loop. At one point, I actually stood outside with my keys in hand, considering throwing my stuff in the car and just leaving. But then I told myself I was being dramatic, that nothing really happened yet. I went back inside, sat on the couch, and tried to distract myself with a movie I'd downloaded. About 20 minutes in, there was a knock on the door. A slow knock, 3 taps, and then silence. My stomach twisted. I waited, hoping whoever it was would go away. Another knock, louder this time. I got up and peeked through the curtain. Of course, it was Dave. I opened the door just a crack, and he smiled like we were old friends. He said he was heading into town and wanted to know if I needed anything. I told him I was good, trying to keep my tone friendly but firm. Then, completely unprompted, he said, "You shouldn't leave your lights on at night if you want to sleep easy. Makes you too visible." He didn't say it in a warning tone. He said it like a piece of advice, like he was being helpful. I didn't know what to say to that. I just muttered, "Okay," and shut the door. I didn't even lock it, I bolted it. That was the moment something in me switched. It didn't feel like I was being paranoid anymore. It felt like he was playing a game, and I had no idea what the next move was. I stayed inside the rest of the day, curtains drawn, every noise outside making me flinch. At one point, I thought I heard footsteps on the gravel again, but when I looked, no one was there. I didn't even cook dinner, just ate a granola bar and tried to stay calm. Around 8 p.m., the power cut out. Everything went black. No warning, no storm, nothing. I stood frozen in the dark for a few seconds, waiting for it to flicker back on, but it didn't. I grabbed my flashlight and went to check the breaker, still on. That's when the panic really started to settle in. It didn't feel like an accident. It felt intentional. I didn't want to assume the worst, but my gut kept screaming that I wasn't alone out there. I stayed in the living room, flashlight on, clutching my phone even though I knew it had no signal. I kept thinking, just make it to morning. Don't open the door, don't go outside, just wait it out. Hours passed. I kept checking the time, counting every minute. Sometime around 11 p.m., I heard something right outside the cabin. A thud like something hitting the wall. Not loud, but enough to make me jump. Then a dragging sound like something heavy being pulled along the porch. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. The flashlight flickered and almost went out, and I thought, if this dies, I'm screwed. I sat there, completely still, trying to listen, but after a few minutes, it all went quiet again. Too quiet. I must have fallen asleep at some point, because the next thing I remember is waking up on the couch to faint light coming through the curtains. The power was still out, but it was early morning. I stood up slowly, stiff from staying curled up all night, and peeked outside. The cup of berries was gone. So were the footprints I swear I'd seen in the dirt near the porch. It was like nothing had happened, no sign of anyone, no damage, just the same still, creepy quiet. I packed my stuff in record time. I didn't even bother folding anything, just shoved everything into my bags. I didn't shower, didn't eat, just grabbed my keys and got out. When I pulled onto the dirt road, I looked toward Dave's place. His truck was gone. House looked dark. For a second, I wondered if I imagined the whole thing, if my mind had twisted everything, because I was already feeling vulnerable from the breakup. But I knew what I saw. I knew how it felt. That sense of being watched, those weird comments, the knocks, the power going out. None of that was in my head. I drove until I had cell service again, pulled over, and just sat in the car breathing for 10 minutes before calling someone. I never reported it. What would I say? My neighbor was creepy? There was no proof of anything. But I never stayed at an Airbnb alone again. And to this day, I still wonder what would have happened if I had opened that door when he knocked the second time. It's been over a year now, and I still think about that weekend more often than I'd like to admit. Every now and then, something random will trigger it. The sound of gravel under someone's shoes, the flicker of a light bulb, even just being alone at home. It's like my brain never fully left that cabin. I told a few close friends what happened, and everyone said the same thing. You did the right thing leaving. But no one could explain the power going out with no reason, or why that guy knew I left the lights on at night, or why he felt the need to show up unannounced, twice, after I made it clear I wanted space. It's like he got some kind of twisted satisfaction out of making me feel unsafe without ever technically doing anything wrong. That's the part that haunts me the most. He never touched me, never broke in, never made a direct threat, but I've never felt more vulnerable in my life. And what really messes with my head is how it just stopped. No climax, no confrontation, just silence. Like he was testing how far he could push before I cracked. Or maybe he just liked knowing I was scared. Either way, I left that cabin feeling like I'd escaped something, even if I can't prove what it was. I still wonder if anyone else has stayed there since. And I still check the windows every night before bed, just in case. I wasn't even being picky when I started looking for a new apartment. I just needed to get out of my parents' house as soon as possible. Money was tight, so when I saw a listing on a community board near my job, advertising a cheap place with no credit check and no guarantor needed, it felt like a lucky break. The photo was blurry and kind of off, but you could tell the place looked clean. I called the number, and the guy who answered sounded calm, polite. We set up a visit for later that same day, around 5:30 p.m. One thing that did stick with me was when he said it was better if I came alone since the apartment was small. That was a little weird, but I didn't think much of it at the time. Everyone's got their quirks. When I got to the address, it was in a tucked-away street in a part of town I didn't know that well. The building looked old, paint peeling in spots, but it didn't immediately feel sketchy. The guy was already waiting out front, and he came off friendly right away. He was tall, thin, probably in his 40s, wearing this button-up shirt that was almost too neatly pressed. He shook my hand kind of tightly and started chatting while we climbed the stairs. I was trying to keep up with what he was saying, but the second we stepped into the apartment, I noticed the smell. It was chemical, strong, like cleaning products, but there was something else under it, something sweet and metallic that made my stomach turn a bit. He caught my reaction and laughed, saying, "Oh, sorry about the smell, I just cleaned the place up." I laughed too, but I was already feeling uneasy. The place itself wasn't terrible. Small, like he said, just a main room with a kitchenette, a narrow hallway, and a tiny bathroom at the end. There was barely any furniture, just a worn-out couch and a single chair by the window. But what really threw me off was the door. On the inside, it looked normal enough, but then I noticed it had an extra deadbolt on the outside of the doorframe. Like, not something you could lock from the inside. This was meant to lock someone in. I pointed at it, trying to laugh it off like, "What's this for?" And he just gave this half smile and said something like, "Oh, it was there when I moved in. Never bothered to take it off." That didn't sit right with me. Who installs a lock to keep someone inside an apartment? I should have walked out right then, but I didn't want to seem rude or paranoid. He kept asking questions while showing me around, but they started getting oddly personal. Stuff like, do you have family nearby? And do you usually go out at night or stay in? At first, I figured he was just trying to make conversation, maybe vetting me like any landlord would. But the way he looked at me while I answered, it felt like he was studying me, not listening. I tried to steer the conversation back to the apartment, asking about the neighbors, utilities, whatever, but he'd either give vague answers or just change the subject. At one point, he asked if I wanted something to drink, water, juice, even offered me a beer. I said no thanks, and that's when I saw him glance toward the door, and then I heard the click. He locked it. The sound of that lock clicking sent a wave of cold through my chest. I tried to play it cool, pretending I didn't notice, but inside I was already running through excuses to leave. I told him I actually had to meet a friend soon, tried to make it sound casual. He smiled, but didn't move toward the door. Instead, he walked over to the kitchen area, leaned on the counter, and just kept talking. His tone was still polite, even cheerful, but there was this weird intensity in his eyes now. I couldn't stop glancing at the door, trying to figure out if I could unlock it without making a scene. The air still had that chemical smell, but it felt stronger now, like it was soaking into my nose and throat. I felt lightheaded for a second, and wasn't sure if it was from the stress or the smell, or both. Then he asked if I lived alone. I hesitated before answering, and that seemed to change something in him. His smile dropped just a little. He asked again, more firmly, "Do you live alone?" My instinct screamed at me to lie, so I said no, that I lived with 2 roommates, both guys, both big and always home. He just nodded slowly and started pacing a bit. I tried to laugh it off, like, man, this place is nice, but I should probably think it over, check my schedule, you know. I walked over to the door, casually, trying not to look desperate. That's when I noticed the key was missing. The lock, one of those simple ones with a keyhole, was empty. My stomach dropped. I turned around to say something, but he was just watching me, not saying a word. At that point, I couldn't pretend anymore. I asked him straight up, "Hey, where's the key?" I tried to keep my voice calm, but it cracked a little. He didn't answer right away, just stared at me for a few seconds too long. Then he said, "Oh, it's around here somewhere." I just didn't want the door swinging open by accident. I don't know why, but that sentence scared me more than anything else he'd said. The way he said it, like it was nothing, while I was standing there realizing I might be locked inside a stranger's apartment. My hands were sweating, and my heart was pounding so loud it felt like he could hear it. I started looking around, not too obviously, just trying to see if there was anything I could use to get out, or defend myself. He walked into the hallway toward the bathroom, and disappeared for a moment. That gave me maybe 5 seconds to act. I went straight for the door and started fiddling with the lock, hoping it was just stuck or something. It wasn't. Whatever key he used, he'd taken it with him. I looked around again, and saw his phone on the counter. I thought about grabbing it, maybe calling someone, but before I could move, he was back. He was holding something. I couldn't see what it was right away, but it was small and metallic. He didn't say a word, just walked back toward the kitchen like nothing was weird. That's when I noticed his other hand was shaking. Just slightly, but enough to know something was definitely wrong. I backed away slowly, trying not to make any sudden moves. I asked him again, this time more firmly, "Can you please unlock the door? I really need to go." He didn't answer, didn't even look at me. He just stood there, messing with whatever was in his hand. When I finally saw it, my stomach turned. It was a small syringe. That was it. I wasn't going to wait around to see what he planned to do with that. I bolted toward the kitchen, grabbed the nearest thing I could, some kind of heavy ceramic bowl, and shouted, "Open the fucking door!" My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the damn thing, but I think my voice caught him off guard. He took a step back, raised both hands like he was calming a dog, and said, "Whoa, relax. No one's trying to hurt you." But his words didn't match the situation. Who holds a syringe while saying that? Who locks the door behind a guest and hides the key? My heart was racing, and I could barely think straight, but I kept my eyes on him while moving toward the door again. He stood in the hallway, blocking part of the path, but not entirely. I wasn't sure if he was going to lunge at me or try to explain more, but I didn't wait to find out. I told him, loud and clear, "If you don't unlock this door right now, I swear to God I'm going to break a window and scream this whole place down." I think that's what finally shook him. He just stared at me, then slowly reached into his pocket and tossed me a key. No words. Just threw it across the room like he didn't want to come any closer. I caught the key midair, dropped the bowl on the floor without even thinking, and ran to the door. My hands were slick with sweat, and I fumbled with the lock for what felt like forever. Every second I expected to feel him grab me from behind, but he didn't move. He just stood there, still holding that syringe, watching me. When the deadbolt finally clicked open, I didn't even bother saying anything. I yanked the door open and sprinted down the hallway, taking the stairs 2 at a time. I didn't look back until I was out of the building, and even then, I half expected him to be following me. But he wasn't. The street was completely empty. Quiet, like nothing had happened. Like I'd imagined the whole thing. I didn't stop running until I got 2 blocks away. I ducked into a gas station bathroom and stayed there for 10 minutes, just trying to breathe and stop shaking. I thought about calling the cops, but what was I going to say? A guy showed me an apartment and made me uncomfortable. He hadn't touched me, hadn't technically done anything illegal, just a ton of weird. And scary. Too scary to feel normal. I didn't even remember the apartment number or the exact address. I was too panicked to notice on my way out. I didn't go back to that area, didn't answer when he texted later saying, "Sorry if I came off intense, hope you find what you're looking for." I blocked the number and tried to forget the whole thing. But I haven't forgotten. Not really. Even now, months later, I still get that sinking feeling when I walk past certain buildings, especially the older ones. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd said yes to that drink, or if I hadn't noticed the extra lock, or if I hadn't lied about having roommates. I think about how calm he was the whole time, how rehearsed some of his answers felt, like he'd done this before, like I wasn't the first person to step into that apartment. And I hate that I'll probably never know for sure. There's no report, no evidence, nothing solid. Just this gnawing memory that makes me double-check every door and trust people a whole lot less. And the worst part, it all ended so abruptly. One minute I'm trapped, thinking I might get drugged or worse, and the next I'm running out into the street like nothing happened. No confrontation, no struggle, just this weird shift, like he changed his mind. Or like he was testing me. I've replayed that day 100 times, and I still can't explain it. I try to tell myself it was just some socially awkward guy with no sense of boundaries, but deep down, I don't believe that. Something was wrong in that apartment. In him. And I'll never shake the feeling that if I'd stayed even 5 minutes longer, I wouldn't be here writing this now. I don't usually stay that late at the library, but I had a paper due the next morning, and I kept telling myself, just one more paragraph. By the time I looked up, the place was almost deserted. It was close to 12:30 a.m., and the librarian had already dimmed most of the lights. I packed my stuff quickly and headed out, texting my roommate that I'd be back soon. The campus was dead quiet. No footsteps, no voices, just the hum of those old fluorescent lights. The parking garage wasn't too far, but walking there at that hour always gave me this weird feeling, like I was being watched. Still, I just kept my head down and walked fast, trying not to let my imagination mess with me. The garage looked mostly empty when I got there, except for this beat-up old van parked diagonally across 2 spots near the entrance. I remember thinking how annoying it was that someone would park like that. As I got closer, I noticed something off. The van's engine was running, and there was no one in the driver's seat. No lights on, no movement inside, just that low rumble of the engine idling. It gave me an uneasy feeling right away, but I tried to brush it off. I figured maybe someone ran back inside real quick or fell asleep or something. I picked up my pace and kept walking toward my car, which was about 2 rows behind the van. That's when I heard it, the soft sound of a sliding door closing behind me. Not loud, just quiet enough to feel intentional. I didn't turn around right away. You know when your body just kind of freezes and your brain tries to convince you that you didn't actually hear what you just heard? That was me in that moment. I stood there for maybe 2-3 seconds, staring straight ahead at my car like if I just kept walking, nothing would happen. But my skin went cold, like every hair on the back of my neck stood up at once. It wasn't just the sound, it was the feeling that came with it. That sudden, heavy silence after the door shut, like the whole garage was holding its breath. I finally looked back, trying to act casual, like maybe I dropped something or forgot where I parked. The van's side door, the sliding one, was now shut. It hadn't been before. I was sure of it. I started walking faster, trying not to break into a full-on sprint, but my keys were already in my hand. I remember pressing the unlock button like 5 times in a row, just out of panic. My car beeped once, way too loud in the silence. I felt exposed, like whoever, or whatever, was near that van could see me plain as day. I didn't want to look again, but I couldn't help it. I glanced sideways just as I passed the van, and I swear I saw something. Not a person, not clearly, but movement. A shadow shifting behind the dark tint of the rear window. I didn't wait to figure it out. I yanked my car door open, jumped in, and locked all the doors so fast I barely registered that my hands were shaking. I sat there for a second with my hands on the wheel, just trying to breathe, but I couldn't stop looking in the rearview mirror. The van hadn't moved. No one came out, but the engine was still running, that soft hum just loud enough to feel wrong in the middle of all that stillness. I told myself to just drive, just get out of there. But then, I don't know why I did this. I turned my head to check behind me before reversing, and that's when I saw the side door was open again. Not all the way, just slightly. Cracked open, like someone was watching through the gap. There was no reason for it to open again, not without someone pulling it. I didn't see a face or anything, but I felt something like eyes. I can't explain it, but my whole body locked up. I slammed the car into reverse, backed out way too fast, and peeled out of that spot like my life depended on it. I didn't even look to see if anything was behind me. I just wanted out. As I turned to go down the ramp, I glanced back one last time, and I swear to God, the door was fully open now. And there was someone standing halfway out of it. Not walking toward me, not running, just standing. Like they were waiting. I couldn't make out a face. Too dark, too far. But the way they were positioned, like perfectly still and angled just enough to see me leave, it didn't feel random. It felt personal, like I had walked into something I wasn't supposed to see. I didn't stop driving until I hit the main road. Even after I left campus, I didn't drive straight home. I don't really know why, but I just couldn't. I turned onto random streets for a while, trying to shake this feeling like maybe I was being followed, even though I hadn't seen the van anywhere behind me. It probably sounds paranoid, but I couldn't shake the weight in my chest. My hands were still tight around the wheel. I ended up pulling into a 24-hour gas station, just to breathe and be around people again. I didn't even get out of the car, just sat there with the engine running, watching people come and go, trying to convince myself that I was safe now, that it was over. When I finally made it home, I locked the doors, shut all the curtains, and turned on every single light in the apartment. My roommate was already asleep, so I didn't want to wake her up. I just sat on the couch, staring at the front door like I expected someone to knock. And the weirdest part, I kept thinking about the passenger seat in that van. When I passed it, the front seat was reclined all the way back, like someone had just gotten up from it. Not dusty, not cluttered. It looked fresh, like it had been used. That detail stuck with me more than anything else, and even now, I can't explain why. But it didn't feel random. It felt like I was meant to see it. I didn't tell anyone the full story for a few days. I mentioned the weird van to my roommate the next morning, just kind of offhand, like I was trying to play it down. But I left out the part about the door sliding shut or the figure standing there. It just felt too weird to say out loud. Like once I said it, it had become more real. But the image of that half-open van door wouldn't leave my head. I started avoiding the library at night, and if I ever had to park in that garage again, which I tried not to, I always made sure it was daylight and there were other people around. Even then, I found myself scanning every vehicle I passed, checking for running engines or empty driver's seats. One day, maybe 2 weeks later, I got curious and went online to see if anyone had posted anything similar. Reddit, school forums, local Facebook groups. I just searched stuff like weird van on campus or parking garage creepy experience. And I actually found a post. Not super detailed, but someone had described seeing the same van, old, white, dented, parked weirdly and running with no one inside, sometime around midnight. They said they felt so creeped out they turned around and left without even going to their car. No one had replied to it, no updates, just sitting there buried in a thread. But reading it made my stomach drop. It wasn't just me. Since then, nothing else has happened. No van, no strange noises, no weird figures in the shadows. It's like it all just stopped. I never saw the van again, and no one ever talked about it on campus. I still think about it way more than I should. Every time I walk alone at night, especially near parking garages, I get this tight feeling in my chest. Like I'm waiting for that soft sliding sound again. It's not like a horror movie where something jumps out and chases you. It was worse than that. It was quiet, intentional, and slow. And it felt like whoever was in that van knew exactly what they were doing. Like they'd done it before. What messes me up the most is that nothing actually happened to me. I didn't get grabbed. I didn't see a weapon. But it felt like I came so close to something really dark that night. Like I brushed up against it without realizing just how close I was. That feeling hasn't left. And I think the worst part is not knowing what would have happened if I hadn't walked a little faster, if I'd stopped to check something on my phone, or if I'd parked just a little closer to that van. I don't have answers. I probably never will. It just happened, and then it didn't. And now it lives in my head, playing on a loop every time I walk to my car alone at night.